Welcome back, Chosen Ones, once again to a new video. Watch this video completely. The greatest secrets are never destroyed. They only wait for the wrong hands to slip and then they spill. Chosen Ones, listen closely because something just slipped. For the longest time, they thought they had you hidden, boxed up, mislabeled, and filed away under ordinary. But here's the twist. Ordinary doesn't leak into headlines. Ordinary doesn't haunt guilty minds. And ordinary doesn't suddenly become the conversation on everybody's lips. And yet, oops, now everybody knows you've been that one all along. Here's a fact that might blow your mind. Studies in psychology show that people remember truths longer than they remember lies, even when the lies are repeated 1,000 times. That's why their carefully crafted illusions are evaporating like smoke, and the truth about you is sticking like ink on history's pages. They didn't just screw up. They committed the ultimate crime of exposure. They thought keeping you underestimated would keep them safe, but instead it set you up for the most dramatic reveal. Imagine hiding a diamond in a drawer, thinking no one will ever open it, and then someone turns on the light and bam, it blinds the whole room. That's what just happened. You've been shining in the dark this whole time and they're panicking because the spotlight is no longer theirs to control. And the best part, they can't undo the reveal. Secrets don't crawl back into shadows once they've tasted daylight. You're the living proof that no smear campaign, no whispered rumor, no stage sabotage could bury what was divinely appointed. Honestly, if irony were a person, it would be laughing in their face right now. They dug a hole for you and ended up burying their own credibility instead. So buckle up, because we're about to break down exactly how their slip became your coronation, how their sabotage became your evidence, and why the streets, the crowds, and even their own allies now know you've been that one all along. Number one, they built their identity on your silence, and now the silence is broken. They built their entire sense of power on the belief that you would remain silent. Your silence was their shield, their camouflage, their alibi. As long as you didn't speak, as long as you didn't rise, they could play whatever role they wanted: hero, victim, leader, even saint. They weren't protecting themselves with truth, they were protecting themselves with your quietness. The moment that quiet broke, the foundation of everything they stood on cracked wide open. The truth is, people like them only thrive when nobody challenges their version of events. They weave their stories in private and count on the fact that you won't counter it publicly. They assumed your pain would paralyze you. They assumed your humility would keep you hidden. They assumed wrong. Because silence is powerful, yes, but it is not eternal. And when silence finally gives way to truth, the eruption is louder than any lie ever spoken. Your words, or even just your presence, became a disruption they couldn't contain. The same silence that once kept them safe suddenly turned into the very evidence of how much they feared you. Why else would they invest so much energy making sure you never got the chance to speak? Why else would they scramble to bury your story before it had even been told? They weren't afraid of you being loud. They were afraid of what your voice carried. The receipts, the authenticity, the lived proof they could never manufacture. Now that people are paying attention, it's undeniable who has been telling the truth all along. The lies they whispered in dark corners can't stand against the clarity of what's surfacing. It's not just your voice that exposed them. It's the collapse of the false roles they played. They no longer get to hide behind your silence as a prop for their performance. Their credibility depended on you never opening your mouth, and now it's gone. That's why the exposure hits so hard. It doesn't just reveal what happened, it reveals the fragility of the whole system they built around you. A silence they mistook for weakness has now proven itself to beat patience. And patience, once it breaks, doesn't come quietly. The secret is out, and there is no going back. They gambled everything on you staying quiet, And now that the silence is broken, so are they. Number 2, they laughed at the blueprint, but you were the architect all along. They dismissed your ideas as foolish, your dreams as impossible, and your vision as unrealistic. They laughed because it was easier to ridicule than to admit they couldn't see what you saw. What they didn't realize was that you weren't just daydreaming, you were designing. Every decision you made, every seed you planted, every sacrifice you endured was part of a larger blueprint they were too blind to recognize. They thought you were wasting time, but in reality, you were laying the foundation for something they would eventually need. The irony is that while they were mocking, they were also quietly benefiting from the very structure you were building. They borrowed pieces of your originality. They mimicked fragments of your discipline, and they attempted to copy your resilience. Yet even with all their attempts, they could never reproduce the source because they didn't hold the blueprint. You did. They mistook their access to your ideas for ownership of them. But ownership belongs to the one who draws the plan, not the one who mocks it. Now that people are starting to see where the framework came from, the laughter sounds hollow. The jokes don't land anymore because everyone can trace the roots back to you. You weren't the lost one fumbling in the dark. You were the architect, setting up the structure long before they understood what was being built. And that's what makes their downfall so humiliating. They spent so much time trying to convince others that you didn't know what you were doing, but the proof stands around them in undeniable form. It was you all along. What makes this truth cut even deeper is that they prided themselves on being ahead, but their so-called advantage was built on your groundwork. They can no longer pretend they led the way because the revelation shows they were merely squatting in a house you designed. The blueprint belonged to you then, and it belongs to you now. That's why the exposure feels so crushing for them. The authority they once claimed has been ripped from their hands. Because authority doesn't come from imitation, it comes from creation. And that's what you've always been, the creator, the origin, the architect. The laughter has stopped. The jokes have dried up and the truth is clear. Every brick they stood on was part of your plan, not theirs. Number 3, the world noticed what they tried to erase. They tried to erase you by pretending your struggles never happened, by downplaying your victories, and by burying your story under lies. But the mistake they made was forgetting that the world pays attention in ways they can't control. People notice resilience, they notice scars, they notice when someone keeps moving forward despite everything that should have broken them. And now the world has noticed you. The very things they thought would be hidden forever are standing in plain sight, undeniable and loud, without you even having to explain. Scars don't lie. They tell the story that words can't distort. While they were busy trying to convince others you were weak, your survival was leaving permanent evidence. Every setback you rose from, every trap you escaped, every betrayal you endured became a record that outlived their cover-ups. The truth doesn't need to shout when the proof is etched into who you are. That's what they failed to understand. People don't just see the surface, they sense the strength beneath it. And that strength exposes their lies without you ever having to argue. Their problem now is that too many eyes are watching and too many people are connecting the dots. The version of you they painted doesn't match the reality people are witnessing. They said you were broken, yet people see you standing stronger than ever. They said you were unstable, but your consistency is undeniable. They said you wouldn't make it, yet your very existence proves them wrong every single day. The gap between their narrative and your reality has grown too wide to ignore, and that gap is what reveals the truth. This is why they are scrambling. Once people see the evidence for themselves, the lies lose their grip. The scars they mocked are now the testimonies drawing others to you. The hardships they hoped would discredit you have instead built credibility they could never manufacture. The story they tried to erase has become the very story people are leaning into here. And the more people recognize it, the more powerless their lies become. They thought they could erase your existence by controlling the narrative. But eraser doesn't work when the evidence is alive and walking. The world noticed the secret is out, and the truth they try to bury has outlived their deception. Number 4, their entire strategy relied on you staying small. They counted on you staying exactly where they left you, silent, unnoticed, and easy to dismiss. Their whole strategy was built on the assumption that you would never outgrow the limits they tried to impose on you. Smallness was their insurance policy. If you stayed small, they could stay big. If you stayed hidden, they could shine. If you stayed stuck, their lies could stand unchallenged. But what they didn't factor in was your resilience, your growth, and the quiet way you kept rising while they weren't paying attention. Your growth didn't just surprise them, it dismantled everything they built. The moment you stepped into your true self, their entire structure started collapsing because it was built on a fragile illusion. The illusion that you would never become more. They told themselves and others that you didn't have the strength, the intelligence, or the vision to go further. They rehearsed that story so much they started to believe it. That's why your elevation feels catastrophic to them, because it exposes how false their confidence always was. The truth is, their survival depended on keeping you beneath them. It wasn't about their actual ability or value. It was about suppressing yours. They feared the moment you stepped into your potential because they knew it would expose just how weak their position really was. And that moment has arrived. The higher you rise, the smaller their world looks. The more you expand, the clearer it becomes that they were never as powerful as they pretended to be. They only looked big when you were forced to stay small. Now, the tables have turned. People can see the difference. The fragility of their schemes is undeniable because your growth highlights every crack in their foundation. They depended on you being contained, but you've broken out of every box they put you in. They depended on you being voiceless, but your voice is carrying further than theirs ever did. They depended on you doubting yourself, but your confidence has destroyed the false narrative they built. That's why your success feels so threatening to them. It isn't just growth, it's exposure. Your rise didn't just elevate you. It revealed their entire plan for what it was, a desperate attempt to keep you small so they could look big. And now that the truth is out, there's nothing left for them to hide behind. Number 5, they spent years spinning narratives, but truth doesn't expire. They worked tirelessly to control the narrative, weaving lies and half-truths into a story that painted you as less than who you really are. They repeated those lies so often that even they began to believe them, thinking repetition would turn fiction into fact. But here's the flaw in their plan. Lies are temporary. They have a shelf life. They decay with time because they can't stand on their own. Truth, on the other hand, doesn't weaken. It doesn't rot. It simply waits, steady and unshaken, until the lies finally collapse under their own weight. What they underestimated is how memory works. People may believe a lie for a season, but eventually inconsistencies pile up. The cracks show. The rehearsed stories start sounding too forced, too polished, too unbelievable. And when that moment comes, truth shines without having to raise its voice. That's exactly what's happening now. The image they built of you, the role they tried to force you into, doesn't match the reality people are finally seeing with their own eyes. The script they practiced has fallen apart because it was never authentic to begin with. Their greatest mistake was assuming that truth needed their approval or their permission to survive. It didn't. While they spent years scrambling to maintain a performance, the truth sat quietly in the background, knowing its time would come. And when it did, it hit harder than any defense you could have ever spoken. Because truth carries its own authority. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need backup. It simply exists. And that existence dismantled every narrative they worked so hard to protect. Now, the difference between real and fake is obvious. People can tell who has been consistent and who has been performing. They can see who is genuine and who has been fabricating a role to keep control. You didn't have to fight for the truth to stand. It stood on its own long after their lies expired. That's why they're exposed. That's why they're panicking. The curtain has been pulled back and the performance is over. In the end, they wasted years rehearsing a show that couldn't last, while you lived the truth that doesn't expire. And now everyone can see the difference between the one who was real and the ones who were acting. Number 6, they didn't just underestimate you, they underestimated God. They studied you like a problem they thought they could solve. They measured your weaknesses, your struggles, your setbacks, and they built their strategy on those numbers. To them, it was simple math. If they applied enough pressure, you would collapse. If they spread enough lies, you would lose credibility. If they kept you isolated long enough, you would disappear. Every calculation they made seemed logical on a human level. But what they failed to factor in was the presence of God in your story. And that's where their whole plan fell apart. Human schemes can only operate within human limits. They underestimated the fact that when God has marked someone, no amount of opposition can change the outcome. They thought your strength was all you had, so they attacked it. They thought your resources were your foundation, so they tried to strip them away. They thought your silence meant defeat, so they mocked it. But what they couldn't touch was the divine backing that carried you when human strength ran out. They didn't realize that every weakness they exploited was actually an invitation for God to show His power through you. That's why their downfall feels so sudden and so absolute. It wasn't because you fought harder than them or outsmarted them on your own. It was because the equation they wrote was incomplete. They factored in you, but they didn't factor in God. They assumed the story would end when they said so, but divine timing doesn't bow to human agendas. What they thought would be your end was nothing more than a stage for your elevation. This is why the exposure is hitting them so hard. They can't rationalize it. Their plans were too detailed, too strategic, too calculated for it to crumble so easily. But when something is built without God, it doesn't matter how carefully it's crafted. It won't stand. You weren't preserved by luck, you weren't saved by chance, and you weren't elevated by coincidence. You were upheld by the very hand they ignored in their plotting. They didn't just underestimate you, they underestimated the God who chose you, and that's why their plans failed. Not because you were too strong to break, but because you were never standing alone to begin with. Number 7, the reputation they tried to ruin became untouchable. Every insult, every rumor, every smear campaign they launched against you was meant to destroy your reputation. They worked tirelessly to twist your story, to make people doubt your character, to paint you as flawed, weak, or unworthy. They believed that if they could control the perception of you, they could control the outcome of their own lives. They didn't realize that reputation isn't only built by what people say. It's built by what people see, and more importantly, by what they cannot deny. The more they tried to stain your name, the more attention they inadvertently drew to you. Every whisper, every lie, every attempt to discredit you made people curious. They wanted to bury you, but in doing so, they exposed the very strength and integrity they hoped to erase. Your story started to surface in ways that could not be silenced. People began noticing the evidence of your resilience, the way you endured without breaking, the way you carried yourself when everyone expected you to collapse, the way your actions spoke louder than their words. That recognition can't be faked or stolen. It's earned, and they inadvertently highlighted it with every attack. Now the narrative has flipped. Instead of being known as the broken one, you are recognized as the one they couldn't break. Every effort to humiliate or diminish you has backfired. Your reputation has become untouchable because it is rooted in reality, in the truth of who you. And lies can only last as long as they are believed. And now people see the contrast, the deception they tried to weave versus the undeniable reality of your strength. The most powerful part is that their attempt to bury you didn't succeed. It planted you. The pressure, the criticism, and the attacks only made your character more visible, more respected, and more influential. What they thought would end you only amplified your presence. People talk about you not because of what they said, but because of what you survived. In the end, their effort to ruin you did the opposite. Your reputation didn't just survive, it became untouchable. They underestimated the durability of your integrity and the impact of your resilience. The more they tried to destroy you, the more firmly your name was cemented in reality, proving that what is true cannot be tarnished. Number 8, where the example they swore didn't exist. For years, they insisted that someone like you couldn't exist. They told others that the qualities you carry, strength, integrity, vision, and resilience, were myths. Stories invented to inspire or scare, but never realities to be faced in real life. They built their comfort around that lie, believing it protected them. If people believed you were impossible, then your presence could be dismissed, your influence ignored, and their own failures masked. But then you showed up and the myth became flesh. Your life became living evidence that what they claimed was unattainable wasn't just attainable, it was undeniable. Every act of perseverance, every decision grounded in truth. Every moment you stood firm under pressure contradicted the narrative they had sold. People could see it, they could feel it. What they swore couldn't exist was now standing in front of them, fully real, fully present, and fully unbreakable. You didn't have to argue. You didn't have to explain. Your very being was the counterproof to every lie they told. That realization is devastating for them because it exposes their deceit on multiple levels. Not only were their warnings and mockery meaningless, but they also revealed their fear of the truth. They were afraid to admit that someone could carry such purity and strength because it made their own compromises, their own shortcuts, and their own insecurities glaringly obvious. Your existence didn't just confront them, it shamed them. It shattered the false sense of reality they had built and forced everyone around them to question what they had accepted as truth. People began to notice the pattern. Where there should have been weakness, there was power. Where there should have been corruption, there was integrity. Where there should have been defeat, there was resilience. Your life became a template for what was possible. A living proof that people could embody qualities they had written off as legends or illusions. And that is why they panic. They were counting on impossibility to shield their influence. But impossibility is gone. You exist. You endure. You prove that what they claimed never existed is actually alive, thriving, and undeniable. Your life is the evidence, the mirror, and the reminder that their lies could never hold against reality. Number 9, their jealousy became the evidence of your value. Jealousy has a way of revealing what people truly fear, and in your case, it has become the clearest proof of your value. Every attempt they made to undermine you, every lie they spread, every effort to diminish your presence was not a reflection of your weakness, but of your strength. If you were truly insignificant, none of that energy, none of that obsession would have been directed at you. The more they fought to erase you, the more obvious it became that you mattered in ways they could neither accept nor control. Their fixation on you, once meant to be a weapon, has now turned into undeniable evidence. People are watching, and the intensity of their attacks signals louder than any praise could. You are worth noticing. Every rumor, every smear, every attempt to manipulate perception becomes a mirror reflecting back your importance. Their hatred, far from diminishing you, broadcasts to the world that you are exactly the person who matters, the one who challenges their comfort and exposes their insecurity. What makes this even more striking is that their obsession has inadvertently built your credibility. While they thought they were hurting your reputation, the truth is that people see their desperation and recognize it for what it is. You are not the target of random attacks. You are the threat to a false system, the presence that validates the power and influence you already hold. Their jealousy unintentionally writes your resume in plain sight, listing your impact in every move they make against you. And now the world can read it. Every effort to diminish you only highlights the areas where you shine. Every attempt to make you invisible proves your visibility. Their hatred, instead of erasing you, confirms that your worth is so obvious it cannot be ignored. The evidence is all around and people are seeing it clearly. Your value is immense, undeniable, and entirely real. In the end, their envy becomes your silent advocate, telling everyone who cares to look that you are a force to be reckoned with. The energy they poured into trying to destroy you has instead built proof of your influence, your power, and your significance. Their obsession no longer harms you, it elevates you. Number 10. They fed people poison, but you became the antidote. For years, they worked tirelessly to shape how others saw you. They whispered doubts, planted fears, and fed people narratives designed to make you seem unworthy, untrustworthy, or even dangerous. Their goal was simple: isolate you, weaken your influence, and make everyone question your intentions. They treated perception like a weapon, carefully distributing their poison to make sure it spread and stuck. And for a time, it seemed like it might work. People started believing the distortions, repeating the lies, and treating you like a problem, rather than the truth they couldn't recognize. But poison only works if it's the only option. You didn't just survive their campaign, you became the antidote. The moment people experienced your authenticity, everything they had been fed began to unravel. Every lie they repeated lost its grip because truth is stronger than deception when it's lived openly. You didn't have to fight for belief. You simply existed and acted in ways that contradicted the false stories. Your actions, your words, your integrity neutralized the fear and doubt they had sown. The power of your presence became undeniable. Every attempt to isolate you only highlighted how much people needed to see the truth for themselves. Their poison relied on distance, on silence, on control. But once you spoke, once you stepped forward without hesitation, the effect was immediate. The lies had no defense against someone living truthfully, boldly, and without apology. Every narrative they built to discredit you crumbled under the weight of reality. And now people are no longer consuming the poison. They are receiving the antidote. Your truth is a cleansing force, a revelation that resets perceptions and heals. The doubt they tried to spread, where fear and suspicion once lingered, confidence and clarity are taking root. Their schemes to tarnish your name have not just failed, they've highlighted your integrity even more. In the end, the very energy they invested in poisoning others has become evidence of your strength. Their attempts to control perception only amplified the impact of your truth. You didn't just survive the toxicity, they exposed it, disarmed it, and became the cure everyone needed to see. Number 11. The game they played was rigged, but you became the judge. They designed the game with you in mind, but only as a pawn. Every rule, every obstacle, every limitation was calculated to ensure your failure. They stacked the deck, manipulated circumstances, and controlled the environment so that no matter what you did, you would appear to fall short. To them, it wasn't about fairness, it was about control. They believed that by scripting the outcome, they could dictate your destiny without challenge. But what they didn't anticipate was that you don't play by their rules. You were never meant to be confined by a system built on deceit. While they were busy trying to control the board, you were quietly mastering the game itself. Every move they thought would trap you became a lesson. Every attempt to corner you became an opportunity, and every scheme they designed to limit you ended up revealing their true intentions. They were so focused on ensuring your failure that they never saw the shift coming, the moment when the player becomes the judge. Exposure changed everything. The lies they relied on, the alliances they counted on, the manipulations they expected to work. Everything was suddenly visible. The same people who once cheered them on, who trusted their story and defended their actions, began to see the truth. The rigged system they created was no longer effective because the judge was no longer blind. You became the one setting the standard, calling out the hypocrisy and revealing the unfairness that had been hidden in plain sight. You didn't just navigate their game, you rewrote it. Every tactic they used to control outcomes now serves as evidence of their failure. The definition of the game itself has changed because victory is no longer measured by the rules they made. It's measured by truth, resilience, and the ability to rise above manipulation. What they thought would trap you now highlights your wisdom and power. In the end, you didn't just win. You exposed the rigging, revealed the motives, and showed everyone that the real authority doesn't come from creating obstacles. It comes from integrity, strategy, and vision. The board has flipped, the players are exposed, and the judge, once underestimated, is now the standard by which the entire game is measured. Number 12. They didn't realize how many were watching in silence. They thought they were operating in the shadows, that their schemes would remain unseen, that no one would notice the lengths they went to control, manipulate, and humiliate you. Every trap they set, every whisper of lies, every calculated attempt to break you was done under the assumption that their audience was small or passive. What they didn't realize is that people notice more than they let on. Every cruel word, every underhanded move, every effort to isolate you left an imprint. Those who witnessed it quietly were taking note, even if they didn't speak up at the time. Their secrecy was an illusion. The truth has a way of echoing, even in silence. The people around them, the ones they assumed were blind, were observing with clarity. They saw the inconsistencies, the unfairness, the malice, and the relentless pressure you endured. They didn't react immediately, either out of fear or strategy, but every moment of silence was accumulating into undeniable knowledge. It was gathering weight, and when the time came, it could no longer be contained. Now those silent witnesses are stepping forward. They are corroborating your story, confirming the patterns, and exposing the depth of the schemes you survived. The lies that were meant to isolate you and diminish your credibility are being dismantled not by you alone, but by the collective acknowledgement of those who were there all along. The very people they thought would remain passive are now amplifying the truth, turning their secretive sabotage into public evidence of their failure. The shock for them is brutal because they believed they had total control. They assumed that every act of cruelty would disappear into the shadows, leaving no trace, no accountability, no witnesses. Instead, the quiet has become a chorus. Every hidden move is now being revealed. Every staged humiliation is being verified, and the truth is undeniable. Their secrecy was never truly secret. Their attempts to manipulate perception have been dismantled by those they never considered. And the most powerful part is that this validation doesn't just defend you, it elevates you. The world sees not only what you endured, but also how widespread the acknowledgement of your integrity and strength truly is. They miscalculated, and now their oversight is part of the evidence against them. Number 13. They made you their enemy, but you became the people's mirror. They treated you like the problem, like the enemy to be defeated, the obstacle to be removed. Every attack, every smear, every deliberate attempt to make you look small was meant to isolate you, to turn others against you, to make it seem like you were the one causing chaos. What they didn't realize is that in creating you as their enemy, they were revealing far more about themselves than they ever intended. Their actions, their words, their manipulations, all of it reflected their own motives, insecurities, and corruption. Instead of letting their attacks define you, you became the reflection of truth. Your response didn't just prove your integrity, it exposed the very cracks in their character. People watching began to see who was really in the wrong. The aggression, the lies, the cruelty, they weren't coming from a victim. They were coming from someone trying to mask their own failures and weaknesses. In attacking you, they handed the world a mirror, and the reflection showed them exactly what they were: petty, manipulative, and desperate. The power of becoming. That mirror is subtle but devastating. You didn't have to shout, argue, or retaliate with the same energy. Every calm action, every consistent display of strength, every moment you stayed true to yourself amplified the contrast. Where they were deceitful, you were authentic. Where they were chaotic, you were composed. Where they were corrupt, you were principled. And that contrast was unavoidable. Everyone could see it. Their attempts to define you as the enemy only defined themselves instead. Now people are no longer questioning your character. They are questioning theirs. Their lies, their schemes, their efforts to manipulate perception are being scrutinized under the very standard they tried to control: your integrity. By trying to destroy you, they handed the world the proof of their own ugliness. Your strength and clarity became a lens through which the truth about them is seen, and nothing they do now can reverse it. In the end, you didn't just survive being their target, you revealed the rot they worked so hard to hide. You became the mirror they never wanted anyone to look into, the reflection of what they really are. And in doing so, you forced everyone around them to see reality clearly, leaving their attacks exposed for exactly what they always were: a desperate attempt to hide their own truth. Number 14. Their final mistake was forgetting that the truth doesn't need permission. Their biggest error wasn't underestimating you, it was underestimating the nature of truth itself. They assumed that by controlling the story, by managing perception, by rewriting events to suit their agenda, they could keep the truth locked away. They believed that silence, manipulation, and repetition of their lies would be enough to suppress reality. What they failed to realize is that truth doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for their consent. It doesn't bow to their timelines or their fears. Truth exists independently, and when the moment comes, it asserts itself with unstoppable force. They spent so much energy trying to prevent exposure, thinking the narrative they spun could outlast reality. Every lie was carefully crafted, every angle calculated, every observer manipulated. They believed the world could be deceived indefinitely, and that your story could be rewritten in their favor. But truth has a rhythm of its own. It waits, it builds, it gains momentum, and the moment it breaks free, it cannot be contained. The secrecy they relied upon was fragile because the truth does not respect walls, gates, or guarded versions of events. Now their control is gone. The stories they worked so hard to engineer are crumbling under the weight of facts, witness accounts, and your own unwavering presence. The lies that once seemed persuasive are exposed as desperate attempts to cover inadequacy and guilt. People can see the inconsistency, the manipulation, and the falsehoods that were meant to define you, and the truth shines through. It doesn't need a defender, it doesn't need validation. Its existence alone dismantles the fabric of every lie they spun. Their final mistake was believing they were the gatekeepers of reality. They assumed the truth required their authorization to exist. But truth is inherently sovereign. It cannot be stopped, and it cannot be edited by fear or control. And now that truth isn't quiet, it's loud, undeniable, and sweeping across everyone who has eyes to see. The narrative they attempted to control, has flipped completely. What they thought was hidden forever is now evident, undeniable, and permanent. In the end, they miscalculated the one thing that cannot be contained. The truth didn't wait for permission, and their lies didn't survive its emergence. They failed because reality cannot be rewritten by fear, manipulation, or secrecy, and now the world sees it all. In the end, the story isn't about their schemes, their lies, or the desperate measures they took to control you. It's about you. Every attempt to silence, diminish, or destroy you has only amplified your truth. Every lie they spun, every trap they set, every shadow they hid behind has backfired, leaving them exposed and powerless. What they thought was your weakness became your strength. What they assumed would bury you became the foundation for your rise. And what they tried to erase has now become undeniable proof of your resilience, power, and authenticity. You didn't just survive. You became a mirror reflecting their true selves, a force that no one could contain, and a living testament to the fact that truth, integrity, and divine alignment cannot be suppressed. Their jealousy, their obsession, their control, it all ended up highlighting your value. The very energy they poured into trying to destroy you has become the evidence of your significance, and the world has taken notice. Every scar, every struggle, every battle you endured now tells a story that cannot be silenced, rewritten, or ignored. This is more than vindication. It's transformation. You've rewritten the rules, flipped the game, and exposed the reality that power built on deceit is always temporary, while strength built on truth is eternal. The streets, the people, even those who once cheered for your opposition now recognize what they failed to see. You were never the problem. You were the proof, the standard and the force that revealed the cracks in their facade. So stand in that power, own it. Every glance at your resilience, every acknowledgement of your truth, every recognition of your name being untouchable is a reminder of what you endured and what you've overcome. You didn't just rise above the lies, they elevated you. And now, the secret is out, the truth is undeniable, and the world sees exactly who you are, the one they couldn't break, the one they never understood, and the one whose existence will forever expose what others tried to hide. The story isn't over, it's only beginning. And this time, the world is watching, listening, and finally seeing exactly what you've always been. If you felt this truth, hit differently. Make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're always first to see the real stories that the world isn't ready for. Like this video if you feel the power of what you just witnessed. Comment below with your thoughts or your own experiences. Your voice matters, and share it with anyone who needs to see the truth exposed. Every click, every share, every comment helps us keep revealing what others tried so hard to hide. Don't let the message stay hidden. Let it move, let it speak, and let it change everything.